Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. Today I got a subject that's going to be a little bit harder, I think, at least for me. But it's super important, and I guess I wanted to talk about it because I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with in today's world. I think that it is, I don't know, something that we need to take a little more seriously, something we need to talk about a little more openly, and uh, and so I guess today we're going to get into mental illness. We have what seems to be a tremendous problem with this in our country, like in the United States in particular. I don't know. It's where I live and it's where I see and experience everything I experience. So I can't speak to the rest of the world, and I'm not going to try to, but I am going to speak to what I've seen. I'm going to speak to some of the problems I've seen. I'm going to speak about the stigma, and I'm just going to speak some ideas that I don't know. I'm not trained in any of this. I don't have any licenses in anything. All I am is a dude who is going to tell you about my mental illness, and my opinions are based on that and my research. And the research is, I mean, it's only as good as, I don't know, what it's worth, I guess. So, if you want to talk about this, if you want to hear some views on mental health, if you want to hear even some probably alternate views that I think are different, I'm probably going to say where I think that I'm not going to say psychology is wrong, but I'm going to show some of the weaknesses that I see in psychology and why trusting in psychology isn't really something that is not something I trust in, but it doesn't mean that there isn't things to be learned. I am fascinated by psychology. I love reading about the studies and the various things we do to learn about the human mind. I just think that we've got a long way to go to put that into context. And I think that we classify a lot of things as mental illness that I think are just different. And I think we're starting to understand that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think we're catching up to that. A lot of mental illness, we are starting to see that there are these couple times of like PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. We're all familiar with like the primary variety where, like highly traumatic or violent events tend to give people, nightmares for years, very, very dramatic, nervous system responses. And people have been exposed to some of this highly traumatic stuff, years and years later, they'll be waking up in, sweats and nightmares and that's traumatic. And I don't have any experience with that form of PTSD, but there's another form of PTSD that I think we're starting to realize is pretty common. And that's like a childhood or a traumatic based PTSD where somebody just goes through so much abuse and so much trauma that they start developing these other signs of mental illness. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and we're not necessarily going to get into all of that, but we are going to talk about the prevalence of some of these diseases. We're going to talk about the stigma. We're going to talk about how hard that is to deal with. And I'm going to share some funny stories. So if you want to hear some stories about, I don't know, maybe I've got some weird ones. I've climbed out of an 8th-story window on bed sheets. Maybe I'll tell that one. That one applies to mental health. I've been thrown out of boys' home for habitually running away. That's also interesting. Could show up here. There's who knows what could show up. Those are a couple of the good stories that I could see showing up. If I don't get around to them, I'm sorry. The teasers are there, I guess, and so I guess I pretty much have to. I guess my mental health journey started when I was a young teenager. I was probably 12 or 13 years old. The first time I saw a psychiatrist and a psychologist, I saw both of them. I had a childhood that was full of bullying. I had a pretty terrible stepmother at the time, and my father generally didn't do anything to stop my stepmother from mistreating me. So this kind of mistreatment, I mean, it was basic abuse, standard, stepchild stuff. I'd get the belt for, things that her kids did, or I'd be blamed for anything they did. I was the oldest, so they learned it from me, I guess, even though it was stuff I never did, or I don't know. It was one of those situations, standard stepchild abuse, right? No big deal. Everybody's had this probably. And, and so I got depressed, right? Like I was having a rough time in my early teens. I was picked on at school. I used to get laughed at. Even the teachers would pick on me. Like the teachers would, I don't know, tell me it was my fault. Like I had a gym teacher tell me it was my fault that I got pushed into the shower room with all of my clothes on, and they turned the water on me, and the gym teacher told me that was my fault somehow, that I don't know, I guess I'm responsible for other people picking me up, carrying me into a shower room and turning on the showers. I don't know. I had a big, no, don't get me wrong. I had a big mouth. I said what I wanted. I didn't really respond to the abuse in the way that people do. Like bullying was, it was kind of ineffective on me. I guess I didn't understand it. Like, I just didn't understand why I was being bullied. I don't know. When you're the weird kid, you don't understand you're weird. When you're just quiet and you sit around and you think weird things that other people don't think, and the only thing you can ever think of when somebody says something to you is how stupid what they said sounds. So people would try to insult me. It didn't make sense to me. So I'd question it, and then I'd be weird, or, then I was picking on them, I guess, sometimes because I didn't understand the way they were picking on me, or it was interesting. Like I remember in middle school, it was there was a couple of dudes that they always liked coming up and challenging my sexuality. They would call me all kinds of gay person slurs and things of that nature. But they do it while pushing me around, and I was like, "What are you gonna do?" Like, they're already pushing me around. Like, what are you gonna do? And so I would say weird things like, "Yeah, but if I'm the, I don't know, insert gay slur here, why are you here touching me? Why are you touching boys?" I mean, it didn't help me, but it was, I guess it was provocational. But what else are you going to do in a situation like that? Right? Like they're pushing me around. I'm not going to like win in a fight. Like, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't never really interested in fighting. I usually just said rude things to people, And usually only because they started stuff with me. Normally, I just wanted to sit in the corner and be left alone. But when they started stuff, yeah, I'd say whatever I felt the need to say. Because if you're going to start something with me, well, then I'm going to tell you what I think of the situation. So did I bring the bullying on myself? I don't know. I don't care. I'm not here to dissect that. I'm not mad about my bullying anymore. But the reason I bring that up is to paint the picture of why I was depressed. I would go home and I would just get off the bus. So we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and it was like an hour bus ride to and from school every day. So, and we didn't have bus monitors or shit back in the day that I grew up. We'd just have like kids kicking the back of my seat or throwing things at me or putting gum in my hair was pretty routine. Trying to steal my stuff or steal my bag or whatever. I mean, anyway, it was exhausting, right? And then you go home, and then you've got a stepmom that's going to, mistreat you on top of it. And so I spent a lot of time literally laying in the dark in my room, piling the covers in a way that made it look like I wasn't in there. So if somebody just peeked in my room and they just think they'd see a pile of covers or something that I was hiding behind. And if they didn't come in and look too hard, that's kind of one of the ways I hid. I hid outside a lot too. I used to try to just stay away from the house as much as humanly possible. But that was my life. And that is depression. That is, I mean, that's learned hopelessness. There's nothing I can do that's going to make my situation better, right? Like even later on, like it wasn't middle school, it was probably middle or later in high school or pretty close to before I dropped out of high school that I even started anything remotely like getting violent back at people as they'd get violent with me. And so I was definitely depressed. I definitely had a problem. And so I started being, they'd take me to these, I don't know, a psychiatrist and a psychologist is what I first started seeing. And it's interesting because I've looked, actually, the first psychiatrist that I ever went to, it looks like his license got suspended a couple of times for, I don't know what the reasons were, but I looked him up years later because somebody told me that they thought that guy license got suspended. Actually, it was my dad that told me because that's why I stopped seeing him, because his license got suspended while I was like under his care. And so I had to see somebody else. And this guy's solution was to teach me martial arts. He had a very thick Asian accent. I don't know where he was from, but his name was very clearly Asian in some form. He had that accent. He was definitely an Asian man. And his answer was that to deal with my bully problem, I needed to learn to fight. Violence was his answer. So that was my first psychiatrist. So obviously I'm out the door and it's not starting very well. Why would violence be the answer for people assaulting me? Why not just, I don't know, punish them for like their crimes against other people? Because that's what we do in civilized society, right? Well, that's not what happened. And so I had that fucked up experience to go through. And then my psychologist spent all of his time talking about how I didn't behave as the other kids and that I should behave as the other kids. I should start liking sports. I should start doing all the things that they do. But I didn't want to do those things. I wanted to read. I wanted science. I wanted to do math. And like, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to explore the world and understand. I wanted to take things apart. And apparently that's weird as a middle schooler. I don't know, to actually be curious, to actually want to know what's going on in the world, to actually look around. And so the psychologist told me to abandon everything that I felt made me me. And the psychiatrist told me to learn martial arts. And everything was my fault. And the only way I can do anything about that is to learn to fight and to become a different person. That's the message I was told. Now, you tell me, do you think I was crazy because of my situation, or do you think I was crazy because how the adults were telling me to solve it? Anyway, it got really bad in my teenage years. I would write things down. I got pretty upset. I got to a point to where literally all I wished was that my stepmom would die. Writings of this were found, and I don't know, they locked me up in a mental hospital, or a hospital for to monitor behavior. I think I was in there, like my first run, I think I was in there 11 days, which apparently is pretty unusual. Apparently you're usually only in there for a few days, but I didn't have any interest in playing any of their games. They all wanted to tell me everything was my fault. It was my fault. My stepmom hit me, or that wasn't even a thing that happened. That I was told wasn't real. Anytime somebody would see welts on me and they would call like the child services, they'd come out, not talk to me, talk to my stepmom, and there was no problems. They'd never come inspect the welts on my body, not even bother. I don't know what the hell Child Protective Services was into. I don't know what was going on with all of that, but nobody gave a shit. And that's fine. It was good for me to learn that early that nobody gives a shit. And all people are going to do is tell me everything happening to me is my fault. So my stepmom beating me because of stuff my brother did, that was my fault or not happening. People beating me up at school was because I was weird and I liked weird things instead of normal things like, sports and fighting. And obviously I was just making up everything I said. Like, I mean, no matter what happened, no matter who I'd tell, I'd either get in trouble because tattling was the wrong thing to do. So I don't know. So then I'd say, well, if I can't tattle, can I just hit him back? Oh no, you can't ever hit anybody, even if they're hitting me. No, you can't hit it. So like, it's literally what do you do with this as a kid? And then you go and you see psychiatrists and they tell you, oh yeah, you learned to fight. Like, you've got teachers telling you can't ever hit. They're not going to do anything about people hitting you. They can see people. Like, I've had gym teachers hold my arm while people hit me. God, the gym teachers are the fucking worst, by the way. I've had so many gym teachers abuse me. I wish I could remember the names of some of them. I'd fucking name their ass right here if I could remember their names. I would too. Oh God, there were some fucking horrible ones. But what do you do with that? When all the adults tell you it's your fault, they give you conflicting stories. Some tell you to fight, some tell you never to fight. What do you do? Well, you do what I did. You go crazy. You realize that there is no answer. You're never going to be able to get out. Anything you do, somebody's going to view as wrong, and you're never going to be able to resolve it. So how do you resolve that? I didn't. I suffered. I was sad. I wanted to die a lot. And I told people that. And I actually started learning that that was probably the best way out. When there were days where people started beating me at school, I just go tell the counselor, I think I'm gonna kill myself today. I wouldn't say people are hitting me. I wouldn't say any of that. I think I'm gonna have to kill myself today. I didn't have to go to classes. I didn't have to face the other students. I didn't have to deal with gym teachers. Sometimes they'd lock me up and put me in the hospital. I've been a number of times. It is what it is. And what do you do? Because I'm the only person that seems to understand what's going on, and everybody else, it's my fault. It's this child's fault. It's this child's fault that his parents hit him, or that he believes his parents hit him, is the way that they would put it. Like, literally, it's just endless gaslighting. Everything was my fault all the time. And so that was my life. And one of the, so I guess we'll get to the story. I teased it. It's kind of a funny story. When I climbed out of an 8th story window, it was a hospital window. I was locked in one of these facilities because I had gotten tired. My stepmom was being particularly cruel. And so I went and I told the counselor that I was going to kill myself if I had to go home. And so I was put in a hospital instead of being sent home. And while I was in there, I don't know, it was interesting because I never really participated. I didn't really ever take any of it seriously. Because nobody cared what I had to say anyway. Why would I speak up to it? Why would I tell a psychiatrist what's going on if they're just going to tell me my stepmom's not actually beating me? Why would I bother? Like, so my path to help was ended by this gaslighting, because I realized that there was no help coming. There was nobody coming to save me. So there was maximizing my comfort. There was maximizing my ability to escape from these places that I had. So I found that if I was more standoffish with the psychiatrist, if I misbehaved, I could actually upset a lot of them. I've had mental health professionals leave sessions on me. I've had mental health professionals drop me as somebody they were willing to see. And it's because what's the point? Why would I be honest with these people when they're just going to fucking gaslight me? We didn't have that term back then. This is a long time ago. We didn't use the term gaslight back then, but everybody was lying to me about everything, and I knew it. And what do you do with that? What do you do with that when you're just being told that everything you see going on in daily life isn't happening? And so they kind of made me crazy, I guess, if you really look at it from that context. But this isn't about blame. This is just about understanding the problem, right? Like, because I'm guessing that my experience isn't unique. I'm guessing there are lots of people that have gone to psychiatrists that just didn't believe them, that told them they were lying, wrote them off as too crazy to understand what was going on. I'm sure that's happened. I'm also sure they deal with people that are so delusional that they're in there saying stuff that isn't true. I'm sure that happens too. So I don't know how to tell them to balance it. I'm not looking to judge this. I'm not looking to say what's right and what's wrong in the context of an individual. I'm looking at this more through the perspective of, if we want something about this to change in society, if we want people to be healthier, if we want people to treat each other better, we have to look at this. And so anyway, I was in there. This was a particularly long stay. I believe this was January of 97, in fact, because this is the stay that I left. I went from this directly into a boys' home, actually. So that's an interesting story. But what was interesting about that hospital stay is I didn't want to go home, and I didn't want to cooperate with them. I made sure I kept telling them I was willing to kill myself every day that I was in the presence of my stepmother, because that is literally the thing that I couldn't escape without this kind of a method, without being put in hospitals. I couldn't escape the stepmom. During the summer, I'd camp down by a stream a lot to avoid her, and that kind of was reasonably okay, but yeah, so that's where I was. I was at a hospital, and I didn't see any way out. I didn't see what to do. I didn't really want to die. Like, who wants to die, right? You just want to stop suffering. You just want to stop having everybody tell you shit that isn't true. You just want a world that makes sense. And the only way that makes sense in the mind of somebody who's been treated that way, well, I mean, I'm sure there are other ways, but the way I dealt with it was to want out. I just wanted out. And it didn't really seem like fade to black was a bad option because, well, at the very least, I'd have no more suffering, right? So not being able to see a way out, I was in this hospital. I wasn't participating, so nobody was talking like I was going to get out anytime soon, which was the plan. And then like social workers started trying to tell me, and I was very uncooperative. Like, don't make no mistake, I was super uncooperative. I didn't talk to anybody. Anybody wanted me to do anything, I'd argue with them about everything. And anything I didn't like, I'm just gonna off myself. And that's where I stood. And when they started telling me that they were looking for longer term solutions because they couldn't keep me there forever. This was a short term facility. I guess in hospitals, they only plan on having people for a few days in these kind of facilities. And they were talking to me about longer term options, and they were talking about other places that they could send me. Well, that seemed like a horrible idea. I didn't really want to deal with that. And I didn't really want to deal with anybody else. So the only way I could do that was go find my own freedom. Well, while I was there in that hospital, one of my roommates, he knew the area I was in. This was a hospital in Peoria, Illinois, and I actually lived in a rural area, like more than a half hour away, and I didn't really know Peoria that well at the time. And so my roommate in the hospital was his like he lived in Peoria. He knew Peoria. He'd lived in Peoria his whole life. And so he had some ideas, some friends' house that we could go to, and we started talking about trying to escape. And it's a locked facility on the 8th floor. And I was looking around for ways to get out, and one night I had a conversation with one of the staff nurses, and trying to figure out if anybody had ever escaped, and he told me a story of somebody that had gotten out of the ward, and they had made it to all the way down to the lobby on the bottom floor, and security was down there waiting when the elevator opened, and that's the furthest he was aware anybody had gotten. Several other people had made it like outside of the doors of the ward, but he wasn't aware of anybody else that had made it to the lobby. That was the furthest he knew. Well, of course, I guess in my mind that was challenge accepted. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I started looking around, and it was just one of those things. I was looking at what I could take apart. Could I take apart the bed? Could I take apart this, that, the windows? How did the windows open? Could I go out through a window? I mean, I was a hobbyist rock climber at the time. That's what I did for fun in my free time. Was I went rock climbing, and it was a good time. And so I knew what I was doing. I knew what my strength was with certainty. I knew the principles of rappelling and all of that. And well, while the windows were like kind of sealed shut, they had these little bolts that had two little dimples in them. And it looked like there was a tool that would go in there that would just attach into the two little dimples instead of like a normal screwdriver head. And that's how the screws would operate. Well, considering the fact that I knew how screws operated, I assumed that they were screws, and I found a method of opening them using ballpoint pens. And I kept having this problem where the ballpoints would like break off of the tips, so the ballpoint would break off, and then the head of the pen would be too big, and it would be dripping, ink everywhere, like messes and shit, where it was horrible. And so I had that problem. And so I actually figured out I could do it with the tip of tine forks. So they had forks in this ward at the time. And trust me, this story fixed that. For the rest of my stay, we were not allowed anything but plastic. And I think that became a permanent policy that they were no longer allowed metal forks after me. So you're welcome, Peoria, Illinois hospitals, for taking your metal forks away from your mental health patients. But yeah, I could manipulate these screws with a fork, and just by bending the fork tines, it would just fit in there, and it worked. So what's interesting is this window, it was on a ledge, and it rotated. So like one edge of the window went out and one edge of the window came in, and it was just rotated. And so we had the window open. I was an experienced rock climber that wasn't afraid of going out there. Now, I say this was the 8th story, but there was a subfloor 4 stories down. So it was only a 4-story drop to the next place. So that's probably only about 40 feet. Now, to me, as a rock climber, that isn't that far because I know that 20 feet is routinely survivable without injury. We're actually like, as rock climbers, it's one of the things that we do. We actually learn how to take a fall from about that height, because if you're advanced rock climbing, you can actually fall from that height when you're starting a climb. And so I had actually had training in how to take a fall about 20 feet. So even if I got down and I fell, I knew that 30 feet was almost certainly survivable with minimal injuries, and 40 feet probably is survivable still, even with major injuries, right? Like, so I wasn't worried about the height, and I had knowledge that made me sure. But we didn't have a way to get down. So what did we do? Well, we had 4 beds in our room, and it was just the 2 of us. And we didn't think that was going to be long enough, because I knew that we were probably going to need more than 40 feet. And it might be long. It might have been higher than that, because these are hospital floors, right? Hospitals have high ceilings. And so maybe the 10-foot, per floor rule, maybe it was more like 12 or 14 feet per floor. I don't know for sure. But my buddy, he went out that night, and he just went out and he asked for some extra blankets. And the nurses gave us a big old stack of blankets, like the size of my body at the time. It was just a huge stack that we got. And we started tying them together. Now we had our own little bathroom off of our room, and we opened up the door, and we hung each knot we tied in between the sheets, we hung over that door and kind of did like a bouncing weight on it to weight test all the knots and everything. And I knew how to tie knots, so I wasn't really super worried about that. But they were those little thin hospital blankets. Like, they were thick enough that, like, I was careful with the knots. So I used like probably a third or more of the blankets in total, like just in the knotting process, because I used excess material to make sure that the knots were secure. But that also meant that each one was shorter. But with the stack of blankets we had, we were able to get it. Actually, I way overmade the rope, threw it out the window, and it's way down on the ground, right? Like it's pulled up on the ground. So we made plenty of rope. It was no big deal. And the way we secured it, believe it or not, was, remember I told you the window opened? What we did was we brought the rope up and we wrapped it around that axle and then pinched the window on it. And so the harder pulling that happened, the harder it would actually pinch on itself, because the pull point of the blanket was pulling the window, trying to rotate it closed. And so additional weight was making it pinch tighter, and that's how we secured the top. And me being the experienced person, I had no fear. I just went first. Now this was a January endeavor. It might have been late December, early January, almost certainly January. And I think it was about 10 below outside. And I'm not sure that I thought about that, because we're in an indoor facility. They had taken all of our outerwear. So I had my shoes because, well, it's still kind of a public place. So we wore our shoes throughout the ward. But like, I didn't have a coat, and it's like 10 below, and like I didn't have extra changes of clothes. I was in the hospital, right? Like but we did have like street clothes. It's just we were only allowed like the pair we were wearing, and it was, it's weird, right? And so I climbed out of this window, and I started walking along, and there was, well, actually, I almost skipped over like what actually really happened here. So I'm climbing out the window, and I'm going down, and the windows are like offset. So like the window I'm in is here. The next floor, the windows are like offset. And then the floor below that, the window was back underneath again. And so I was down 2 floors, standing on the window ledge, 2 floors below where I was, and everything seemed good. I had climbed down to that point. Everything felt good. My arm strength seemed perfectly fine. And I was giving my buddy the thumbs up, right? He was staring out the window, just seeing what I was doing, trying to figure it out, probably scared to death of his turn. I don't know how he felt about it. But anyway, being 17-year-old me or 16-year-old me, and wanting to show off, wanting to get fancy, knowing I was a rock climber and I had the skills to manage this, I decided to push off. I'm going to rappel, go ahead and get down this and let my buddy come. Well, I push out. I only push out a couple feet off the wall. Like, I'm not looking to get crazy here, just a little bit of showing off. Well, I maybe slide, like let the slack slide through my arms, maybe 3, 4 feet. And then I go to grab it, right? Because I'm not looking to fall. I'm just looking to get down a little quicker. And then I hear the rip. And so I felt a pretty good catch, and I started swinging back towards the wall a little bit before it fully ripped. But yeah, I fell. And so it was probably from about 16, 17 feet that I fell. So this is well within like what I know how to fall, right? Like I know how to take this fall. I'm a rock climber. I'm aware of it. I've been thinking about it the whole time climbing down. So it's right in my mind that I may have to react to this. So it wasn't that big of a problem. So all I did was, okay, the angle that I fell, the way that I grabbed with my upper body and the way that it tore, I fell kind of upright. Like I didn't start rotating or anything. I would have been really worried if I would have rotated toward my back. I mean, I have ways of dissipating that energy, but it is actually better for me to land on my feet. So what I did was I just unlocked my knees and I got ready in a wide stance, and I was going to fall backwards. I was going to roll backwards and then dissipate, more energy out by allowing my arms to slap the mats as well. Or the ground. I guess I'm used to doing this on mats, but the physics of what I got to do with my body is the same. Well, I actually got really lucky. I fell, my knees weren't locked, and I started planning my roll just fine. And I just sat down on a big aluminum piece of ductwork. There was a big piece of aluminum ductwork that was probably about thigh high to me. And I literally just sat down on it, and it crumpled under me. And the crumpling of this big aluminum ductwork on top of this roof dissipated the rest of my energy. And I just kind of sat down in it, and I was fine. I was fine, just fine. It was literally the best fall I could have ever hoped for. And so my buddy is up in the window, 4 stories above me. I'm on a floor that I'm now on the roof of a 4-story building. And he's, I don't know if he's yelling or whatnot, but I'm trying to give him the thumbs up. I'm trying to yell that I'm fine. And I assume he starts yelling back. And then I see the lights in the room go on. Well, I don't wait to see what's going on because my buddy's still hanging out the window. It clearly wasn't him that hit the lights. So I wasn't hanging around to see what was going on because I had to get the hell out of there. So I started running around, and actually I found a little spot. I think it was where one of the lobbies were, that the glass had like it was one of those like little canopy, like rounded out glass spots. I just hopped on that, slid down it, and it was, 15 feet or so down to the ground, sliding down this big glass thing. It was actually kind of fun in the middle of winter, partially snowy. It was just really easy to slide right down. And I'm on street level. I'm outside of the lobby that they said was the best that anybody had made it to. And so now I don't know what to do because I don't know the city. I don't know what's going on. I don't know anything. And my buddy's still up there. He's not coming because I saw the lights go on. I don't know what to do. So I start walking. There's a Hardee's up the way. I walked up there and I bummed a cigarette and started realizing that I really had no options. Also, as the adrenaline wore off, I started to realize that I probably had sprained my ankle pretty good. It was hurting pretty good, and I was kind of not feeling too great being on it. So I started walking back to the hospital. And so there I am. I'm freezing. It is so cold. And I'm walking back to the hospital, and this white van pulls up, and I don't know what they are. Maybe they're getting directions, whatever. And so they pull up, and it's two police officers in a uniform in a completely white unmarked vehicle, van. And the driver yells over the passenger. So the cop driving yells over the cop in the passenger seat. He starts yelling over him, and he starts yelling something to the effect of, "Son, what are you doing out here? Don't you know how cold it is? It's got to be below zero out here. Son, why you got no coat on? Are you crazy?" That's right. I was escaped from the hospital psych ward. And a cop rolls up on me asking me if I'm crazy. That may be the single funniest thing that's ever happened to me in my life, because that's what happened. Is I literally just started laughing in the cop's face. And then he started yelling at me that he didn't think it was funny, and he was worried about, me being not having a coat, and worried about me freezing to death and whatnot. Like, I mean, he was coming from a good place. I mean, he was yelling at me in that weird cop authority, like, but it was probably 11 or 12 at night too. Like, it was like midnight, and I'm 17, right? Like, I mean, it is what it is. And so, luckily they just had me get in the van. They drove me back up to the ward, and I got to spend a few hours in the ER in a room that they kept locking me in the ER. Like, I don't know, it was kind of weird. They'd come in and lock the door, and they'd come in, and I don't know, social workers and administrators would come in and yell at me and talk about how I left against medical advice. Now insurance isn't going to pay it and all this other stuff. And I didn't give one rat's hairy ass about any of that. They all wanted to lecture me about how stupid I was and how the hospital is considering refusing me treatment and not allowing me back in. Like, they were just recklessly threatening me with all kinds of stuff. And that's funny to me because I'm an escaped mental patient. And again, they're making it my fault. They literally declared that I was a danger to myself or others, to the point that they chose to lock me up in an involuntary way. And they're yelling at me because I did something reckless and dangerous. It's fascinating, isn't it? How are we ever going to fix mental illness if we keep treating people this way? How are we going to make people able to recover if we keep blaming them for what we do to them? How is it ever going to get better? And this is my problem with the way we deal with mental illness, right? My experience with mental illness is everybody makes it my fault. Everybody makes it my fault. I'm doing it wrong. I see the world wrong. I'm making other people hit me. I'm provoking them. I'm this, I'm that. No, sorry. Not everything in the world is my fucking fault. And if you want me to get better, you have to push a different agenda. You have to start with a different narrative. And I guess that's one of the reasons I feel the need to talk about it, is because I do think that there is a different narrative. I do think that there is another way of handling it. But it doesn't involve telling the person how wrong they are. It doesn't involve making everything that person's fault. It does involve teaching them how the world works. It does involve teaching them how their actions may influence others into treating them certain ways. That is worth talking about. And I guess I'm going to go far out on the benefit of the doubt and say that I hope that's all they were ever trying to do. But most of the time, I just don't think they wanted to see my perspective. They didn't want to deal with a child who was actually getting abused at home. They didn't want to deal with a child who was legitimately getting bullied, because then they'd have to do something. But if they tell me I'm wrong, I'll just go home and cry about it, and they don't have to do anything about it. They don't have to solve anything if they just make me go home and cry and think it's all my fault. But how's that working for society? How's that working for everybody else? How is that working for everybody else that has any other kind of mental health issue? Because the world's hard. And I actually get more worried when I see somebody that I don't see signs of depression or anxiety in. That's how bad it is this day and age. If I don't see signs that the world has you stressed out, I wonder what you're doing to make the world worse. Because the only people that seem not stressed out about it are the people that don't follow the rules, the people who are abusive constantly. Those are the only people that ever seem to not be plagued by all of these kinds of problems, these anxieties, the depression, the OCD, the paranoia, the fear, the personality disorders, all that. But even then, you still have the personality disorders, the people that don't seem to have like anxiety and all that. Chances are they're probably just like, people with a personality disorder, like narcissism or antisocial personality disorder. There are a couple others that really kind of put them above the display, just at least displaying the behaviors of like anxiety and depression. They usually have the problems. They're just, they display it very differently. They display it through confidence, right? Like the more they have to assert themselves, the more confidence they display. That is them actually showing their signs of anxiety in some of these conditions. But even beyond that, here's the real big problem. I don't think mental illness is permanent in most cases. Now, I think we have different classes of mental illness. Like, I'm not going to argue with like schizophrenia or dementias or some of these other things that really, really, really seem rooted in a physiological cause where there's actually a physical like distortion to reality. Those are different animals. If you've got a situation where there's hallucinations, auditory or visual, you've got mental ideology that makes it impossible to distinguish reality from fact. Like, I am not including those types of mental illnesses in what I'm talking about right now. Those are a different animal. I don't have experience with that kind of mental illness. And I don't feel like I'm qualified to speak to it at any level. However, the anxieties, the depressions, the OCDs, some of even the personality disorders, yeah, I've been diagnosed with pretty much every one of them by some different person at every time. I've got PTSD. I've got I've got like all of the personality disorders in cluster B, except for I think histrionic's the only one nobody's ever talked to me about in cluster B. They've talked to me about narcissism. They talked to me about antisocial personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder. Like, I've heard all of these are things. Then I've got a psychiatrist at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, if you care what they have to say, telling me that no, it's none of that. All of that kind of stuff presents as this complex PTSD of reoccurring childhood abuse. And that's where all this comes from. And that's the basis for all of this. Well, I don't know. I don't know who's right, who's wrong. I've been diagnosed with everything under the sun. And if I try to just dissect what people have told me about me, it's a lost, hopeless endeavor. I'm never going to get a clear answer. It's not going to be. What am I going to do? Throw away everything, go see a new psychiatrist and trust them? Like, how would this work? How do I get out of this hole now? How do I get out of this? I've been diagnosed with everything and told that it's hopeless except for medications. Well, it's interesting. What you've been watching on video, I haven't been on medications in years. Not since my divorce. I had a horrible time during my divorce. I came off pills real quickly when somebody was stealing my pills from the pharmacy before I could get my prescriptions filled. They were just going down to the pharmacy and stealing my pills. They committed insurance fraud and stole my pills, and the cops wouldn't do anything about it. Insurance wouldn't do anything about it. The cops wouldn't even file a report, and the insurance and pharmacy wouldn't give me new prescriptions so that I could have it without a police report, but the police wouldn't do it because it was my ex-wife stealing the shit. Like, this is insurance fraud. This is she's literally stealing this stuff before I can get it out of the thing. And I can't get anybody to listen to me. Again, it's just another one of these insane problems out there. And I will say that the cops did eventually go and basically tell her, okay, he said stop. If you keep doing this, we are going to have to make an arrest on the situation. But it was too late. I by the time that I got the cops to do that, I was already 3 days off the pills. I'm never going back on those again. If you've ever come off antidepressants suddenly, it's the most fucking terrible experience ever. I get these, they call them brain zaps. In the back of my head, I'd get this thing that felt like getting hit by electricity. And about half of the time this would happen, if I was standing, I would literally fall down. It was like a strike of lightning hitting the back of my head, the upper neck, and going down my spine. My legs just went limp. There was nothing I could do. And I had to deal with that for about a week. It was fucking bananas. There was no way in hell I'm ever going back on a drug that does that to me again, because I've got vindictive psychos stealing my shit, causing it to happen. I can't do that. I can't be in control of it. The cops won't take a report. I can't get a new prescription. It's not even it's that even if the psychiatrist were to reissue the prescription, it has already been filled. It's against the law to give that to me again, because now I'm getting double medications, right? There's a maximum to how much I was on the maximum dose of this Effexor medication that I was on, that and Wellbutrin at the time. And coming off of both of those together suddenly was just out of control, horrible. And so nobody cared. Nobody wanted to do anything to make sure I could get the prescriptions restored. Again, it was all my fault, I guess, for some, I don't even understand how to deal with some of these problems, because they tell you don't take matters into your own hand, but the cops don't do anything. So what do you do? What do you do? Hope you don't die when you go through withdrawals from your medicine. So that's no way to treat people with mental illness. These aren't even drugs that like people abuse. Like everybody's on fucking anxiety drugs or SNRIs or Wellbutrin. Like everybody's on this shit. Like there's like 40% of American are taking one of these pills, right? Like one of these antidepressants. It's crazy. And so I'm never going back on them again. So what's interesting is I'm sitting here, I'm sitting down, I'm probably doing the best as far as I've ever done as far as mental health. Part of that was getting rid of the ex-wife. Part of that was getting off all these pills. Part of it was saying, look, fuck you, all of you goddamn psychiatrists that are telling me something different every time I talk to a different one, or changing your mind every time I tell you about a new childhood experience and you change your mind on what the diagnoses are. Like, I'm not getting the impression that this field has any idea what they're doing. I don't think they know what's going on. And even if they did, I don't think they're interested in listening to me or helping me with my problems. I think they're interested in telling me what reality is and that's something different than what I'm experiencing. And how are we ever going to make mental health better with that? How are we ever going to do that? And I've been treated so, like I said, the people at Mayo, I guess they treated me nice. They actually listened, unlike most of the psychiatrists I've been to. But they just gave me a different diagnosis and a different explanation and a different set of reasons why I need, I don't know, medication or other ridiculous interventions. And how is somebody supposed to get better treated like that? How is somebody supposed to get better when they're being told it's a different problem every time they see somebody? How are they supposed to get better when they're told that, well, they just need a different medication? How are they supposed to get better when they're told that these conditions don't get better? Which is another thing I don't believe. I do not believe that if you are depressed or that you are anxious, or even if you have a personality disorder, I do not believe you are stuck there. That doesn't make me right. It doesn't make it the popular psychiatric opinion. I'm not licensed in anything. Maybe you shouldn't listen to me. But why is it that we have this problem in America and the problem isn't as widespread in other countries? If this is just something that we're saddled with, why is it different here, right? Because something that just happens, like we get anxious sometimes, like people are anxious and we just have to accept that anxiety exists and that's that. Well, then wouldn't anxiety exist in like similar numbers across societies? Like, isn't the fact that one society has higher rates of mental illness than another society a sign that there's something about that society that's causing that in people? And isn't that what makes the most sense? I don't know. But I believe we can fix these things. As a matter of fact, like I've talked about him before. There's a gentleman out there, actualized.org, Leo Guru, I think his name is. And he has a wonderful video on dealing with neuroticism, where he defines, anxiety and depression and all these things, all these little like micro, like these weird mental illnesses that we all have. He just lumps them into neuroticism, and he talks about counterintuitive ways of dealing with them. And I found a lot of interesting insight in that video. We're well into the way here, so I'm not gonna rehash that video. Maybe I'll make something similar of my own style at some point. But he talks about how we can look at the world and how the way we look at the world and the way we interact with the world can impact and shape our little neurotic behaviors, and that the way, like one of the things that he talks about is the counterintuitive nature of so many things in life, right? Like it's counterintuitive. What's the best way to deal with anxiety? Well, accept that there are things you don't control. Acceptance. Just accept the feeling of anxiety. Accept that it's there. Accept that I don't have control over tomorrow. Tomorrow's got unknowns to bring. And once upon a time, that used to bring me great anxiety because what am I going to do to control tomorrow? Well, all it is all I had to do was stop trying to control tomorrow. And my anxiety diminished a lot. And And I think that a lot of mental illness is like this. Like what makes us depressed? Well, I think we have a crisis, maybe even around the world, about purpose right now. We have failed to develop a healthy sense of purpose for one reason or another. And I think part of that is, I think we're in an unprecedented age of moving outside of like religion. I think that for a long time we found purpose in religion and family, and I think society has shifted from that. And I think the more we shift away from these notions of purpose that we used to have, the bigger of a problem we have with our purpose. So what is our purpose? Like I had this problem, right? Like this is probably one of the most recent struggles that I still don't think I'm over yet. I think this is one of the reasons I'm enjoying YouTube so much, is it's giving me a sense of purpose. I'm out here, I'm talking to people, I'm sharing who and what I am, sharing ideas that I have with the future. I don't know, trying to build a community or find friends, or I'm not even sure what it is I'm trying to do, but I feel like I have motion in a direction. I feel like I have hope for the future. And this has been surprising in how it's made me feel. Like I've been afraid lately because the world is kind of crazy out there. If you look out, there's plenty to be afraid of. And a lot of it to me seems pretty legitimate. I mean, people are getting deported to like work camps without due process. That's a thing I'm scared of. And why? Well, you couldn't tell now, but I've gone into, like, at the end of summer, like I tan really well and I just don't go outside very much anymore. But I'm afraid if I go outside too much and I get a nice tan, I've walked into Mexican restaurants and they start speaking Spanish to me and I have no idea what's going on. And then I'm sorry, you like, and they just assume that I must be Mexican at that point. And that's a scary place to be. I'm going to stay inside and I'm going to avoid getting any color. Like I think I'm going to be careful with that for a little while, because it's crazy. They're just taking people. They don't care what documents or rights they have to be here. They're just doing what they're doing. And so the sense of purpose that I have found getting into YouTube has helped. Well, okay, so maybe they are going to do that, but at least I'm here talking about what I think. I'm standing up for what I believe in. I'm telling people about the things that I'm seeing in society that are ridiculous. And I don't know, and we'll see, but it is interesting to me how much that sense of purpose, it's not that it alleviates that fear. It's that it at least makes me feel like I'm doing as much as I can to do something about it. If enough of us are talking about it and enough of us have the courage to stand up anyway, then doesn't that fear by default actually get diminished? Like, isn't the act of standing up to that which is trying to intimidate us take away some of its power? Like, that's the reason they try to push the fear so hard, right? Is so that we sacrifice our choice. We willingly go lie down and take whatever's to come. Well, I guess I'm not doing that. I'm going to stand up. And I guess if they're going to haul me off to a prison, I guess my fate will be my fate. I don't really have control over that. And it is weird that I can say that now, because 15 years ago, I probably would have been spending my entire life trying to avoid a catastrophe like this. Well, what can I do to make sure that I'm never in that position? And I'd probably approach it that way. Whereas now it's, well, I guess I just got to go on and be me. I got to be realistic about what's going on and go forward. Anyway, I guess that's an interesting way to end a video that I started talking about mental health. And it is a subject that's very important to me. It's a subject that I think is plaguing us as a society. And it's a subject that's plagued me. I may be feeling good today, but who knows what I'm going to feel like tomorrow? Who knows where this journey is going to go tomorrow? But I do have hope, because I have seen the growth. I have seen my anxiety diminish over time as I've learned about how to deal with, various neurotic thoughts that I have. I've learned to be less depressed by confronting the things that cause me depression, or by engaging in the things that I get depressed by not engaging in. Like, there's a certain amount that I think in my life I've I've been depressed because I wasn't willing to do the thing that might make me feel less depressed. Like, why don't I get up and get back into rock climbing again? Isn't exercise good for us? Isn't that a great stress relief? Isn't that better for, our well-being all around? We know this about exercise. And yet I don't do that. So there are points that I've come to, and there's points that I have to grow. But I do think it's critically important that if there's one thing you can take away from any of this, it's that we do have power over our mental illness. I'm not going to go so far as to say we have the power to cure ourselves. I don't know if we can really sit down and change our minds to the point to where we're never anxious again or we're never depressed again. But I don't think drugs are the answer either. I think education, I think self-development, I think evolving ourselves as people and trying to be better and trying to understand more. I think these all have the power to combat mental illness. And I think we should talk about that more. I think we should talk about our mental illnesses more. I think we should stop mistreating people with mental illnesses. And I guess if you're in the boat where you're afraid of talking about yours, I understand. If you're afraid of admitting what you have, because it can be any reason. You don't want to show the weakness. You don't want to be mocked. You don't want to deal with the stigma of being labeled as, a crazy person. I get all those things. And I don't know what the answer is for society, but I guess I do what I do, and I'm just going to talk about it. Until next time, then, be well.